Life can be extremely overwhelming at times. It can just feel like it's one thing after another that we can't seem to get a break. And as a consequence, we often develop high levels of anxiety or indeed slip into a state of feeling very low, feeling very helpless, and feeling very hopeless about ever getting through it and coming out the other side. That being said, there are some things that are fairly straightforward that can really benefit the way in which we perceive our lives. And I suppose, first of all, we need to look at our narrative. I mean, we tend to have a negative narrative that we're not even aware of. And we do tend to tell ourselves very fixed stories about what our workload is like, what our circumstances are like, what our relationships are like. And we need to create an awareness of those to ensure that we're giving ourselves the best possible opportunity to live the life that we want to live. I mean, oftentimes we'll notice ourselves talking about how busy we are, how we don't have enough time, how people don't like us, how we're so unsuccessful, how we're no good at what we do, how we don't like how we look. And again, it's this continuous ongoing criticism and judgment and assumption that our life is useless and hopeless and bleak. And it's about taking a step back from that. Now, oftentimes, as I said, this narrative has been installed in childhood, so it's not always the easiest thing to do to recognize it, but even becoming a little bit more aware of our tendency towards negativity towards the self and negativity towards the world around us makes a considerable difference to being able to challenge those thoughts, those self limiting beliefs, and our assumptions and predictions about the world around us. Because again, our life is a construct, so much of our perception of what goes on is based on our past experience as opposed to being based on our objective reality. So it's about recognizing the role that you have to play in your own life and being very mindful of the way in which you add to your adversity by telling yourself stories that aren't anyways beneficial. It's also being very aware of the impact that overwhelm has on our capacity to be efficient and to make good choices. I mean, when we feel overwhelmed, when we feel anxious, when we feel very sad, when we feel detached from ourselves and from the world around us, we make poor choices. We tend to do things to try and alleviate our internal experience of boredom, our pain, our anger, our resentment, our frustration, our jealousy, or whatever it is that's going on. So we resort to scrolling through our phones, or, picking at food all day long, or having a drink, anything just to avoid the fact that we're not particularly happy in this moment. And I suppose the more we do that, the worse we feel about ourselves, and it becomes this vicious cycle where we spend like 2 hours on the internet when we have a work deadline, and then we get so angry and frustrated with ourselves for the fact that we have wasted that time, or we end up eating an entire bag of Doritos, and then we feel frustrated, we feel fat, we feel very self-loathing, and again, this vicious cycle of negativity which can be so hard to break. However, that being said, it's always going to be easier to open the bag of Doritos or the tub of ice cream. It's always going to be easier to scroll through Instagram than to actually live consciously and say, okay, I'm not particularly okay with what I'm at the moment, but I have the agency within me to do things differently. I have the capacity to make a choice here as to what it is that I do. And if I'm in touch with my emotional experience and I can recognize boredom or frustration, then I can work with it as opposed to trying to suppress it and avoid it. And as I said, it's not always the easiest choice to do the conscious thing, to live consciously. But that being said, you can spend your entire life procrastinating and avoiding and feeling like as if your life is passing you by, or you can take autonomy. You can decide, okay, do you know what, I'm in the driving seat here, I have all of this subconscious stuff going on, but I can try to bring as much of that into my conscious day as possible. Because again, as I said, we're very much driven by habits and by our autopilot systems. We need to create greater awareness in our life in order to make the choices that will bring us to the life it is that we want to live. Likewise, we need to start applying the things that we know are good for us. I mean, we all read the articles on how you can feel better, how you can improve your health, and yet very few of us actually apply these things on a day to day basis. So much of feeling better is about being disciplined and establishing a routine that works for you and that incorporates the things that you need to do in order to feel better. And this means going to bed on time. It means not always being on your phone. It means making healthy choices when it comes to your food, getting sufficient exercise, make sure you're connecting with other people, make sure that you're working in alignment with the purpose that you want to establish in your life, that you are finding meaning in your day, that you are living a life of awareness, that you are monitoring your thoughts, that you are aware of your emotional experience. And unfortunately, a lot of us don't have these skills within us to apply these things. And this is why sometimes it is a great idea to get external help just when it comes to establishing the habits and the disciplines that can make such a substantial difference in how you feel about yourself and in how you feel about your life. It's also recognizing that we have to be very honest about what we do with our time. I mean, oftentimes we'll complain that we don't have enough hours in the day, and yet we spend a considerable amount of our day doing stuff that is in no ways productive, that is no ways helpful to us, basically that makes us feel bad about ourselves. As I said, making poor decisions, looking at somebody else's Instagram and being like, oh God, my life is shit in comparison. I mean, that doesn't change anything about your life. It just makes you feel worse about it. So it's being very aware of the things that you do. Like even those 3 or 4 minutes of time that we assume you're not going to be able to do anything in, they are all opportunities. And we need to be, as I said, living very consciously if we want our life to be a better place. It's not enough to do something just for a few weeks. These are things that you need to incorporate into your day to day life. And awareness is huge because, again, as I said, when we are accountable for all the ways in which we fuck up our own lives, then we can really start making improvements and seeing areas that we need to work on in order, as I said, to feel better and to be able to show up to our lives a little bit better. Recognizing as well that you're never going to master life. I mean, all of these kind of workshops are just, a lot of them are bullshit because they tell you that your life is going to be significantly different, and it's possibly not. I mean, the most of us can ask for is just to become more aware so that we're not driven by our subconscious, so that we're more able to tolerate our emotional experience and not completely overwhelmed by it, so that we can be more conscientious in the way that we deal with other people, that we can contribute to society, and that we can feel like decent fucking people. I mean, we don't all need to be successful, we don't all need to change the world. All we need to do is change our own little world and become more embedded in it, as opposed to just being passive and just watching the days go by and telling ourselves that someday in the future we'll be happy and we'll be successful and everything will be different, and instead of just being like, okay, today I can do this one thing. So recognizing that you don't need to have all of the solutions to life's questions, that it's just a step-by-step process. You don't need to know the final destination to take the first few steps. You don't have to know all of the answers. It's very much one step at a time, having faith in the direction that you're going, even though you may not know exactly what it is that you want to get to, but just moving in alignment with who it is that you want to be as a person and where it is that you would like to see your life going and what you would like your life to have stood for. So slow it down, be mindful, take time to assess your life and areas where you might potentially be doing things that don't contribute to your overall well-being, and making small incremental changes that are easily applied so that you can build momentum and you can become that little bit more satisfied with your day-to-day life, as opposed to pushing everything out to a future point that may never actually arrive. If you would like to work with me, get in touch with me on the website. It's fundamentals.ie.